Paula P works here. I just finished watching Monsters, 103 Mercies, Dragon Damnation. I liked it a lot. I think it was really well animated. I kind of like the soft, almost pastel style of everything. Really cool. Not so much One Piece, but I do like the One Piece isms or One Piece flavor that they did put in there to bring it on back to being sort of in the fold with the original series, right? So here's the funny part. We're not going to talk about the special beat for beat because if you watch it, you've seen it. If you read Monsters, you know what's going to happen. We're really just going to talk about all the little lore aspects I saw and how I think those matter moving forward. So again, I think you should watch this. It's very well animated. It's on Netflix. It's not too long. It's about 16, 20 minutes. It's a good watch. It is very enjoyable. Okay, so let's start at the end. I like how once the special ends, we fast forward to Thriller Bark, which has been reanimated. Thank you, because I swear, for that Skypiea special from back in the day, they did not reanimate the Nolan parts, and that just really makes me angry, because that's like the best part of Skypiea. But yes, they reanimated the Ryuma end at the Thriller Bark arc when Ryuma tosses Zoro the sword, and he's standing on top of the tower, and he's burning up, right? They reanimate that. That is fabulous. Love that. That's cool. So that too connects all of what happens in the special right back to One Piece, because One Piece is in the special. So we know for sure that this isn't like some weird spin-off type thing. This is legitimately Monsters that legitimately relates the Ryuma in Monsters into that Ryuma that is in One Piece. And we see that even more so throughout the special, because how Ryuma dresses is how the zombie Ryuma dresses. So these things are one-to-one, okay? What's also super interesting is that they mention Wano at the end of the special. So what's interesting about that is that we're saying Ryuma traveled from Wano to whatever town he's in during the Monster special, because where he's at looks like some random town in one of the blues. It kind of looks like the island that Ace and Blackbeard fought on. I don't know if that's intended, but it looks like an old West saloon type town. And I know there are a bunch of those in One Piece, but it really reminded me of that town specifically. I think it was Barno Island or something like that. Another thing that's really cool is that Ryuma's sword Shusui is black during the time of this special. So that confirms a couple of things. That confirms Haki exists. He has Haki, and he is an accomplished swordsman at a very early age. So that puts him like at a higher level than Odin. At least we know. We don't know when Mihawk turned his blade black, so we don't know if the two are peers in that way. Because in the current story, Mihawk is in his 40s, right? And then Zoro is in his 20s. And I want to say here, Ryuma looks to be in his 20s or 30s. He could be slightly older. I am not sure. But the fact that he is that accomplished this young is crazy, and he's deserving of all his titles and accolades, because that's wild. And Shusui looks the same as it does in One Piece. Now, look back at the original Monsters one-shot. Of course, back then, Ryuma doesn't have a black blade, but I wanted to check. I just wanted to check, because it's been a minute since I read it. Shirano, as you know, turns out to be a scumbag. Ryuma cuts him down. DR is meant to be very corpulent during the time of these events, which is very funny, because in the original one shot, he's quite slim throughout. We only see that he's put on weight during the time of this, because in the past, when Shirano and him called the dragon on that first town where Flare was originally from, he was a slimmer man. So he was eating well from all the riches that he and Shirano plundered from that first town, from the looks of it. What's also very interesting about Shirano, and I did a short about this, I am wondering if we're saying that as a swordsman, Shirano was a sham, but as his descendants move forward, they come to birth, or it came to a head, and they birthed the prodigy. Because you cannot tell me that Shirano and Mihawk don't look alike. I mean, a samurai fighting like a conquistador or like a crusader type guy. The similarities are too parallel. I can't. Also, DR gives me Buggy vibes. I don't know if that was intended, especially in this special, because in the original one shot, he kind of looked like a clown, but it was very unclear because, of course, this is a black and white manga. But he's wearing face paint in the special, so I'm like, what are you trying to say here? You kind of get what I mean? It's really weird and interesting, but you can't tell me that Shirano and Mihawk aren't relatives, because they're the only two guys now in the canon who dress like this. I don't know. We have to see. I don't know. But the dragon, right? The dragon is a very weird point of interest because the dragon is depicted in the same way it is in Monsters. However, dragons are a touchy subject in One Piece because the two dragons that we've seen are Vegapunk's dragon, number 13, and the weird small green dragon from Punk Hazard, right? So we know that Vegapunk brought them back, but what we don't know is the timeline of dragons as an animal species in the One Piece world. From the introduction of the special by Zoro, which is cool. Oh, I forgot to mention, this whole thing is dubbed, which I appreciate it because I genuinely like the One Piece dub. I think it's cool. So I'm glad Zoro gave us an introduction to the show and mentioned there are multiple dragons, which I can believe because that makes sense that there was a time in the One Piece world in which dragons were a big deal. And I'm going to make a video about that soon because I think that's going to be a very important point to bring up later on concerning another character. But what is interesting here is that the dragon summoning horn is still a thing, which makes me think, okay, where did this horn come from? Because we're in Lore Piece now. This is a very Lore Piece special. You can't tell me it doesn't matter because it does. Ryuma's a canon character in One Piece. We're in Lore Piece now, okay? So was the dragon's horn an artifact from years gone by in which maybe the progenitors of the celestial dragons use dragons as a weapon to do what Shirano and DR were doing to towns? Maybe that was what a Buster Call was back then. Burning down towns that didn't bow down to the will of the celestial dragons. Maybe so. I don't know, but I find that very fascinating that this is very similar to a Buster Call. It just lines up too well. And then where do these horns come from and why are they able to summon this creature? Are there more? Where did they go? You kind of get what I mean? Can the sound be replicated? What's also a very interesting point is that they kept the design fairly similar to how it appears in the one shot, but based on how goofy the dragons look from One Piece 13 and then the green one, I'm wondering, are they goofy looking because they've been revived? Did Vegapunk have to fill in some pieces? They look similar enough to the dragon in Monsters, and they breathe fire like the dragon in Monsters. So these are natural abilities done by a real animal in the One Piece world, which I will say this just as an aside, that's an interesting thing that this type of animal has a very interesting, unique ability. I'll just say that. And it's a real animal. It's not a mythical creature. It's real. So that's just a topic to keep in mind. But I'm wondering now, is this how dragons are going to look in One Piece? Or is it that this dragon is older than the ones we see in One Piece? Because they're relatively around the same size, though 13 might be bigger. It's kind of hard to judge with 13 because there are no buildings or anything to compare 13 to, whereas the dragon in Monsters was compared to buildings. He was about the size of a 2-story building, or perhaps a little bit over that. So I wonder what that means. Are the dragons made by Vegapunk genetically enhanced to be larger? Or maybe just size variation is a thing? Because I will say too, as a counterpoint, Dragon 13 and the Green Dragon are two different sizes. Dragon 13 is around, like, say, the size of a giant, maybe a little smaller than that. And then the Green Dragon's about twice the size of Karoo. You know, I mean, it's strange, but it does make sense that you have varying sizes of a dragon. Now, what could happen seeing as how that the dragon in Monsters now is black, and I'm just going to take that as canon, as lore, that this dragon in particular is a black dragon. Maybe different colors mean different things. Maybe red dragons run larger, and then the black dragon could be the fiercest type of dragon, but they are generally smaller than red dragons, and it could be green dragons are the smallest. That's something to think about. I don't know, but it really does get the mind turning as what are they going to do with dragons in One Piece? Because at some point, at some time, we're going to get a formal explanation about the importance of these creatures. Because you can't tell me that the dragon horn wasn't an artifact from a civilization that is now gone. Because the way that this is situated, it seems as though this is in a weird point in history that we don't know anything about. Like, this is a time before Brook, but this is a time before any important other characters have been established. I don't know if we have met a character in the story that existed within the time of Ryuma. I can't really say that. But what's also an interesting point to make is, okay, if Ryuma traveled from Wano to the outside world, right? Did the idea of a samurai come from him and stories about him? Because they keep the joke of him trying to find himself because he doesn't know that the king, the sword king of this world, is Ryuma, which then makes me think too, sorry if this is rambly, but it gets the wheels turning, that if he was the first strongest swordsman, right? Let's say that the title was started by him, then does that in turn create somebody like Mihawk, who was then inspired to gain that title, and then it loops back around to his descendant Zoro, who then wants to take back that title from Mihawk. I can see that happening. Also, what's interesting is that if the idea of the samurai was perpetuated by Ryuma and stories of Ryuma, that means that he has had a great effect on the One Piece world as a whole, because a lot of people who are associated with Wano know who samurais are. I remember Brook was one of the first ones to bring it up, like way back in the day, before we even got to Wano. I think before we even met Kinemon, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is during the call that the Straw Hats heard as they approached Punk Hazard. They heard the call about samurai cutting people down. So that's just interesting in itself, because the idea now is, how far does Ryuma's reach go in how he was just wandering around saving people? And what was the first feat that gave him this title of being like the world's strongest swordsman, or being the strongest warrior around, or what have you? What was the feat that did that? Because the dragon thing, and the way it's presented in Monsters, the animation, it feels like this was just one of many things that he had done. Did he cause dragons to go extinct? Was he going around slaying dragons? Or is it just the one dragon? From what we've been hearing, it seems like it's just this one type of dragon. And from the way they're pubbing it up, it feels as though a dragon on the whole is more threatening than a Sea King. I'll come back to this point in another video, but I've been sort of concocting this theory that the reason why we have so many Sea Kings now is because their greatest predator has become extinct. And I think that greatest predator was the dragon. I think if you pit a dragon against a Sea King, dragons are higher up on the food chain, because regarding how big they could get, because they could get even bigger than Red 13, what if they can just pluck Sea Kings out of the ocean? Like, say, the Lord of the Coast, right? What if, say, Red 13 was able to just pluck the Lord of the Coast out of the ocean? What if that's possible? What if they just feasted on Sea Kings? And since they're gone now, you have all these different varieties and sizes of Sea King. Don't know. But it would make sense to where the bigger ones have lived long enough to have intelligence or to have insight or whatever, because most likely they live too far down the ocean for a dragon to get them, so they have the opportunity to grow. So that makes sense. And it could be that sea kings and dragons are adversaries as opposed to dragons being higher on the food chain. Maybe they fought in the past and the bigger ones would fight the larger dragons, but due to perhaps people like Ryuma being around, they hunted dragons for sport. And now, since they're all gone, the Sea Kings can simply thrive. So, yeah, with all of that being said, I enjoyed the TV special immensely. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. I know that was a bit of a ramble, but there was just a lot of thoughts I wanted to get out, and I found this extremely fascinating, and I hope it leads to more cool stuff in the future. Okay, that's it. See you next time.